Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do another mixed haul. I got a bunch of stuff over the last few weeks that I've watched and read and listened to, so I thought I'd go through it. It's not a lot, so we should get through it pretty quickly. All right, first we got some books, some CDs, and some movies. All right, so first let's do some books. All right, so the first is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This book has been around millennia. It's basically something that the Tibetans used to read to the dying or to the dead, and basically it's like a renewal type of thing where death is just another a door into another life kind of thing, right? So it keeps being read, so I picked it up. And next up after that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Harper Lee's only book for such a long time, but then she wrote one recently. Um, this book is one of the greats of American literature about a Southern lawyer who defends a black man accused of rape by a white woman, and you get to see the racism of the South in all of its infamous glory in that book. All right, so what else here? We got Alain de Botton's Consolation of Philosophy. I have not read this philosophy book, but it sells pretty well, so that's why I picked it up. Alain de Botton has performed a stunning feat, as with his internationally acclaimed How Proust Can Change Your Life, he has transformed the arcane into something accessible and entertaining, something useful and kind, drawing on the work of six of the world's most uncommon, brilliant thinkers. De Botton has arranged a panoply of inimitable wisdom to guide us through our most common problems. The consolation of philosophy is smart, lucid, and pleasing. All right, what's up after that? One of the great Russian books, uh, Anna Karenina. Karenina, is that how you pronounce it? Ignorant Intellectual. This is part of the modern libraries, right? Modern library books. Yeah, modern library paperback books. It's one of the great, like I said, Russian books. Next up is Penguin, 20th Century Classic, Dorothy Parker, Complete Stories. All right, so this is all of her short stories in one volume. All right, it's not a huge book, right? Um, Dorothy Parker was what? She was a New Yorker, right? I think she was born in New Jersey, actually, but she was a New Yorker. She was part of the Algonquin Roundtable. I think she actually founded it. One of the great writers of the 20th century. Her wit is what she's famous for. I mean, she wrote Hollywood movies as well. I think she was up for a couple of Academy Awards. I remember her biography. Um, and her stories are quite good. So if you have not read any Dorothy Parker, I would suggest that you should. All right. And then we got Sun Tzu, Art of War, nice hardcover fiction translated by none other than James Clavell. Remember James Clavell? He's the one that did what? Like Noble House, King Rat, those books, those Japanese books, Asian books. Um, he translates The Art of War, which is one of the great Chinese books written like what? Like more than 2,500 years ago. It was written, and basically it's all just the tenets of war. How do you use psychological warfare? How do you use warfare on different terrain? How do you use war when your opponent has a much larger army than you? A whole bunch of different scenarios and situations. But his because he was a philosopher before he became a general in the Chinese army, right? And so uh, a lot of his wisdom is put into the book, right? And people actually use it now in business. I mean, I guess business is kind of war, competing against other corporations, and you want to be one up. I guess the parallels of an actual war can translate well into the business world because a lot of businessmen read that book as well. So, all right, so that's The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Let's do a CD. Lynyrd Skynyrd, Street Survivors. This is the one that has that smell on it, which is probably my favorite Skynyrd song. It's basically, an anti-drug song. What's Your Name is also on this, and what's another famous one? You Got That Right. It's another good one that's on this album. This album went platinum, but it's the last one that they did with all the original band members. Actually, they had a new guitarist on this one. What was his name? He ended up dying in a plane crash. It was like Casey Gaines, yeah. So Casey Gaines comes on board for this album, does an extremely good job, and gets in an airplane with Van Zandt and the other band members, and they run out of gas. They run out of fuel in their airplane, and they crash the airplane. It kills Gaines. It kills Van Zandt and a couple other band members, and some of them survive. Um, but that's basically the end of Skynyrd in its original form was this album, right? So um, it's an extremely good album if you like Southern rock. Some people don't. Then we got L.A. Woman by the Doors. It's probably their second best album, put out in '71 if I remember correctly, yeah, by Elektra. Probably their self-titled album is the best, but this one probably is their second best. This one is the one that has Lover Madly, L.A. Woman, The Wasp, and Riders on the Storm, which is one hell of a song. If you have not listened to that song, that's one of the great songs of all time. All right, what's up next? All right, let's do the movies and then we'll be done. This is pretty quick. All right, so we got the Matrix, the Ultimate Matrix Collection. So basically, this has a nice booklet. All right, although why they made it small, I guess save paper, save money or whatever. But they should make it about the same size as the actual case, right? So, but they made it smaller. So you have the Matrix. All right, you have Matrix Reloaded. Then you have Matrix Revolution. So you have the original trilogy, and then you have an extra, the Matrix Experience. All right, and then you have the the animatrix, right? The anime movie, right? Or it has all those shorts in it. Um, so basically, you got 5 Blu-rays in this package. This seems to be coming on the market a bit more because of the fourth movie, the one that came out recently in the last few years. Um, and so if you want to have all the Matrix movies, you'll have to get the fourth Matrix movie outside this. So some people are selling this in order to get the next box set that came out that has the original 3 movies and the fourth movie on it, and in 4K as well. So, but you can't go wrong with this. This is great. The fourth movie you don't really need. The first 3 were good. The first one was the best, one of the greatest, sci-fi action movies of all time. The second one was pretty good too. The third one, you know, you're getting in there, and then they do a fourth one like 20 years later or whatever, right? So, anyways, extremely good film, especially the first one. Almost everybody's probably seen it now. All right, so next up is a DVD. Anybody collect these anymore? Anybody watch these anymore? All right, so this is called Sorcerer, and this is basically what? I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. It's in the Criterion Collection called The Wages of Fear, which is basically, I can't remember who directed it. I'll put it down here, and I'll put the picture up here or whatever, right? Of it, The Wages of Fear. And basically, it's about these guys who are transporting dynamite, right? So, and this is basically, like a remake of that film. Basically, it takes place in South America, um, and it stars what's his name from Jaws and Blue Thunder. What's his name? Roy Scheider. Yeah, Roy Scheider. All right. So Roy Scheider stars, but basically the way that Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, probably the greatest horror film of all time in my opinion, did this film was extremely good because he breaks it up. There's like 4 vignettes at the beginning to introduce you to the 4 main characters of the film, which takes up almost like half the film. And then they're all in South America, escaping from death or whatever in the United States because of the stuff they were doing. And then they take on a mission to bring dynamite across a mountain range or anyways through rough terrain through a jungle. Bring dynamite or um, where old dynamite, where the nitroglycerin is kind of like outside the dynamite package, right? It could explode at any time. They're bringing it through, rough jungle in order to get it get it to a an oil uh, an oil patch where the oil is coming out of the earth and it caught fire, so you just have big flames, right? So they got to blow it up in order to put the fire out, right? So anyway, so do they all survive? No. Who survives? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You got to watch the movie. But yeah, I was quite gripped with it. I quite enjoyed this film. I did watch Wages of War, and the Wages of War was pretty good as well. But this one is not a foreign film; it's an American film, so it's a little bit easier to follow, and it's in color rather than black and white. Uh, so I quite enjoyed that, especially the way that Friedkin set up the whole film in the first place. It was extremely good. All right. Uh, they were expendable. This stars Robert Montgomery and John Wayne, and this is basically about what were those boats called? So it was a time in World War. I think this is during World War One. Yeah, the PT boats. All right, PT boats. So it was a time where um, you had submarines patrolling waters. But what if you didn't want to go under the water, but you still wanted to sink like a battleship or whatever? Could you do it without going under the water, right? And yes, you could with a PT boat. So this is basically the introduction of the PT boat, where you had they're small, quick, fast boats that go along the water, and they have like two or four. Um, they're not missiles; they're torpedoes, torpedo bays on the side of the boats, right? And so you just shoot them. There's like four of them you can shoot, and you shoot it at a battleship, and it does the same thing as a submarine. It basically blows up the side of the ship and sinks it, right? So, but they're quick and they're maneuverable, right? But they're not as stealth as a submarine, right? So, but they're a lot cheaper to make, right? And so this is basically about um, them being in and around. I think it's Pearl Harbor, if I remember correctly. The Battle of the Midway. Battle of the Midway. Yeah, yeah. Devastation of Pearl Harbor. So they go out and they start sinking warships on the ocean with it. And John Wayne does a pretty good job with this. All right. So that's that one. Contempt. This one is an extremely. It reminded me a lot of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is Elizabeth Taylor, one of her greatest films, and you know how um, she goes after Richard Burton. They're actual husband and wife in real life, and in this film they play husband and wife as well. It's based on the Edward Albee film, and man, they just go at each other. I mean, like figurative swords out, man, and they're just blasting each other with their mouths and everything. Just right. It's an awesome film. But after watching that, I don't think anybody would ever get married. Um, well, this one kind of reminds me of that. Now, this one is the Studio Canal, part of the Studio Canal collection, and it stars Brigitte Bardot, Jack Palance, and Michel Piccoli. All right. And this one is directed by Jean-Luc Godard, right? And this is one of the great French films starring Brigitte Bardot, and she has a husband, and them two kind of lose interest in each other, and then kind of slowly through the film go at each other, kind of like in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but they do it in kind of more of like a French European style, where they're not screaming or yelling or anything half the time, but it's like it's quite good. It's the dialogue in it is quite good. So uh, then I watched the romance film of the Turner Classic Movies, TCMs. They have these 4 packs, a lot of them on DVD. Um, Problem is I got it and not realizing only 3 of them, the films were in it. Um, which one wasn't? Love in the Afternoon. Love in the Afternoon wasn't in it. Love in the Afternoon wasn't in it. But the other 3, extremely good. I really enjoyed Mogambo, which starred Cary Grant, right? Mogambo, no, Clark Gable and Ava Gardner and Grace Kelly. Three of the big names back in that day, and they're in the African jungle, and he's a hunter. He collects animals for zoos, right? He goes hunts down animals for zoos, and really good. Now, I'm not a huge fan of romance. Being a guy, I mean, I don't know, is that stereotypical or whatever? But basically, there's few and far between the great romance uh, movies that I really like. But I really like Mogambo in this series. So, all right, then we got Watermark. This is a documentary about basically water, and it's basically vignette after vignette of going through what water does and how important it is to human society or human survival or whatever, right? It's a very, very visually beautiful film if you have not seen this film. All right. Speaking about a beautiful film visually, this film, Samsara, wow, what an awesome, awesome film. Visually gorgeous film, all right? If this ever comes out on 4K and I see it, I'm going to pick it up immediately, all right? Then The Eagle Huntress, this is basically, took place in Tibet, right? Is this in Tibet, if I remember correctly? Anyway, basically, there's like a history going back centuries of Tibetans with eagles or hawks or whatever, and they go hunt with these hawks, right? And there's a whole training. They actually have a competition for it, um, and but it's a male sport or a male calling. Women aren't allowed to be in it, and she becomes one of the first girls to do this, and she's like like a young teen or whatever. She gets her own eagle or hawk or whatever eagle, yeah. And they made a documentary on it. Um, Breaker Morale. This is arguably one of the great Australian films, but I started watching it. I didn't like it at all, so I ended up stopping watching it. So I can't recommend it. Then I found this, and this, my friends, is an extremely hard find. This Blu-ray of Dogma, because of it's a Kevin Smith film, but Kevin Smith doesn't own any of his films, right? And it's usually like a movie company like Paramount or United Artists or something will own the film, right? And he'll make it. So they sign him for let's say 2 or 3 films, and then he does those films, and he doesn't own those films. The movie company owns them. Well, with this one, it ended up being um, what's the name of those guys? The two brothers. Uh, just give me a second. The one guy who's no longer making movies because of all the sexual assault allegations from him. The Weinsteins. All right, so the Weinsteins actually bought this film personally, right? Um, so it's not owned by their company; it's owned by them personally, and they have no motivation to put this out. So it came out on DVD, and then it had a limited run on Blu-ray, and now the Blu-rays, have been distributed a long time ago, and there are no more because there's no renewal contract to put these out, and the Weinsteins have no interest in putting the movie out. So the movie's stagnant. You can't watch it in a streaming service. You can't. The only way you can watch it is on Blu-ray or DVD, and you have to end up buying it used because there is no new copies of it anymore, right? So it's become quite a collector's item in a way, right? So I'm glad I found it. Um, and I found it for $3. So I could probably sell this, for $20 or $30, right? So, and it's such a fun film. It's my favorite Kevin Smith film, although most people usually pick Clerks as their favorite film, but I actually like Clerks 2 better than Clerks because of Rosario Dawson. She's such an amazing actress, and she's got that magnetism on screen, right? So, um, and I really liked Mallrats as well, but this one is my all-time favorite, probably because the first time I watched it and didn't know anything about it, and then when Alanis Morissette shows up as God, yeah, I fucking was laughing my head off. I'm going, wow, that's just brilliant, right? So, and Kevin Smith is what'd you call it, a Canuckophile, I guess you could call him. He really likes Canada, um, so he put Alanis Morissette, a Canadian, as God, right? So, anyways, it's quite a funny movie if you haven't seen it. Next up is Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence, and this film. Every time I watch it, it makes me cry. All right, and the reason why it makes me cry is why would somebody create this, right? So William Hurt, or is it John Hurt? No, William Hurt is a creator of artificial life forms, of basically of robots, and he creates robots all the time. And he came up with the idea because the future world, because of global warming and destruction, uh, the West has put a moratorium on having kids. You have to have permission from the state to have kids, and only a few get to have kids, right? Um, so he thought up an idea of creating a child, basically, um, who's a robot, but he creates that robot um, to love, all right, and that's the leap, right? So he creates a robot. You say like seven words in a certain sequence to this child robot, and this child will change from a curious thing that's acting like a child to a actual human child with all the human emotions, and love being the most strongest of it. So they end up loving you like a child would, right? And it's supposed to fill the emptiness of childless couples who aren't allowed to have children, right? But the problem with it is what do you do with the child? Because it doesn't grow up, it doesn't grow older, and it continues to love you, right? So in the situation that Spielberg puts this in, and there's so many different situations that this concept or idea would be such a good movie, and Spielberg takes one of them, and that's basically they already have a son, but the son is expected to die, and he's in like suspended animation because what he has, whatever disease or problem that the boy has, is beyond medicine of the time. But then miraculously they save the boy and he comes back. And what happens is after he comes back, uh, the child, whose name is David, the artificial child, who she has imprinted on herself. So he looks at her as his mother and loves her unconditionally and all that, right? Well, uh, the rule is that if you have one of these children and you don't want the child anymore, then you have to return it to the factory so that they can destroy it because it can't uh, pair bond or bond with another person, so they have to destroy it, right? But she didn't want. She cares about the thing, but she doesn't want it around anymore because she has her real son, right? And so she wants to get rid of it. So she gets rid of it without having it destroyed. She doesn't return it to the factory. So this little boy is out in the wilderness with his teddy bear, facing the world alone, and that's the depressing part. And he ends up meeting up with Jude Law, who's a sex robot or whatever. And anyways, it goes on from there. And what he does is he goes on basically a pilgrimage um, to find the blue fairy from Pinocchio to make him a real boy, right? Because he has simple thoughts because he's made as a child, right? Like a 7 or 8 year old child or whatever, right? So, um, anyways, it's an extremely depressing film, and it's one of Spielberg's better films. But a lot of people just don't want to watch it because it's such a heart wrenching film, right? So even the ending is like so heart wrenching. It's really really difficult to watch this film, especially if you have children. So Artificial Intelligence, one of the great movies. All right, The Lost Boys, one of the fun movies, directed by Joel Schumacher, starring Kiefer Sutherland and what's the other guy's name? This guy's name, James Patrick. I think it's James Patrick, isn't it? Yeah. Basically about vampires, and the two Corey Haim and Corey Feldman are both in it. Before the tragedies of those two guys, well, one of them, anyways. Um, they used to be called the two Coreys. Anyways, this is a fun film if you haven't watched it. It's basically about vampires, a vampire nest in Los Angeles, and this family moves into a house where the next door neighbor is basically the leader of the vampires, right? Anyways, it's quite a fun film if you haven't seen it. That one and what's the other one with the vampire hunter? What was the other one called? Fright Night are the two really good, vampire, with a little bit of fun attached to them. Vampire films of the 80s. They're both out in the 80s. Although I also liked was that Anne Perot film where she's a vampire and she goes after the Italian mob. What was that called? I'll put it up here. It's quite a fun film as well. All right, and then I found this double, the two Crocodile Dundee films. If you haven't watched them, they're quite fun. And I found the Blu-ray copy of Child's Play. This is also quite a fun horror film about a serial killer who ends up dying, but because of some sort of voodoo magic or whatever, ends up being implanted into a child's uh, doll, and he ends up becoming a mass murderer. Anyways, Deja Vu. This was quite a fun film. I enjoyed this more than I thought it was. It's directed by Tony Scott, who I do collect, and it's kind of like Minority Report in a way. Basically, they have the technology to look back into the past, like 4 days into the past, but they can't like jump to different parts or anything. They just open up a window of whatever 4 days in the past, and then they just follow it forward, right? And there's a terrorist attack on a on a boat or whatever, and Denzel Washington investigates it. He's an ATF agent or whatever, right? It's quite a fun. Rooster Cogburn, which is basically the second film starring John Wayne. The first one, the Coen brothers made a remake of it. What was it called? I'll put it up here. Um, it was a very good movie. This one wasn't as good. All right. Uh, John Wayne is quite old in this film, uh, and the film wasn't as interesting as the first one. And the John Hughes 5 movie collection. This one has Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Days Off, She's Having My Baby, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and Some Kind of Wonderful. And Some Kind of Wonderful is my all-time favorite teen love movie or whatever. And John Hughes was huge in the 80s, right? Everything he touched was gold almost, right? And those were 5 of his films. They're not all directed by him, but, he wrote all of them and produced all of them. But, Howard Deutsch directed some of them, but John Hughes and Howard Deutsch have some sort of relationship because um, Deutsch has directed a few of Hughes' films. And then I got the second Ben New Trays, Ben New Trays, or District 13. This is the second film in that series. The first one was like a Luc Besson production. Was this one as well a Luc Besson production? I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Um, but the first one was directed by, I'll put the name because I'm old, right? I can't remember names. But anyways, he has a direct relationship with Luc Besson, and Luc Besson, if he doesn't direct something, sometimes will produce a movie that this guy directs. And the first, District 13 film was quite fun to watch. It was a parkour, the parkour craze was at that time, and this one just continues it. So quite a fun film to watch. Then my son and I watched this Walt Disney film, Dinosaur. It was okay. It's basically about a group of dinosaurs traveling to their summer place where they spawn or whatever, have babies or whatever because of a meteor bombardment of the Earth where they were at the time is no longer safe, so they end up going to their spawning grounds, and it's the journey from there to there. And then I watched this one. Speaking of Luc Besson, here's one of his Valerian. All right, and this one a bit forgettable, but still fun to watch. You can't go wrong with anything that Luc Besson touches. All right. Anybody who argues differently, I don't know. I'll have to question their ability to enjoy films. Um, this film, I watched it a couple of weeks ago, and I can't remember it. When I can't remember much of the film, it usually means it's not a super great film. And last but not least is this one I picked up, John Waters film. All right. John Waters films suck, basically. They suck so bad, they suck so bad, right? He's got that reputation of sleaze, right? And this is basically stars, the guy from Terminator 2 who plays John in Terminator 2, the John Connor's, Sarah Connor's son, you know, sense of a relationship with Arnold Schwarzenegger or the robot or whatever. And anyways, he does this film. This film sucks, basically. Um, I stopped it halfway through, like I did a previous John Waters film. This one's called Pecker. I don't know. Do you like John Waters films? If you do, leave a comment and tell me why. Because every John Waters film I pick up, I got to stop because of some sort of disgust or boredom. It's like the acting just sucks or whatever. It's like underground stuff. But anyways, it's just so bad, bad films, right? Okay, all right. So I think that's everything. That's everything for now. I'm always watching more stuff, and as I watch it, I'll bring it in. And you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing, and I'll talk to you in my next video. You have a great day, and bye for now.